In this lesson, we'll look at the value of using retrieval practice spaced out in time. We will be strengthening our retrieval pathways and allow for multiple rounds of consolidation during sleep. Let's remind ourselves about sleep, that when we go to sleep, all of those hippocampal memory traces that were formed during the day's learning, they're going to get reactivated so as to strengthen the cortical memory traces. Notice there's more ink being written in these cortical memory traces, and we will link those memory traces together to form a unified memory trace of the information we learned during the day. So sleep is really important if we want to be good learners. Sleep is a good friend to learning. Now, if we are repeatedly studying, so we have multiple study sessions separated by sleep, then our brain is going to enjoy the benefits of multiple episodes of consolidation. So again, when we first approach the material on day one, when we're studying, we'll be left with weak memory traces, but a strong one in the hippocampus. But then we go to sleep, right? And then we're going to be strengthening those cortical memory traces and refresh the hippocampus for the next day's study session. So when we study on the next day, we'll form some nice new strong hippocampal memory traces, and then we go to sleep and consolidate yet again. So we'll have strong cortical memory traces. So when we space out our study sessions with sleep in between, we are in a position to build strong cortical memory traces. And again, every time we study the same material, then we are reactivating those cortical memory traces, and then during sleep we're strengthening those very same cortical memory traces so that we have strongly stored information for what we were studying. Now, when we get to this point where we have strong cortical memory traces, you'll remember from cases like HM and Clive, then we no longer need the hippocampus to retrieve this information. And so that is kind of how the system is working. We are constantly refreshing the hippocampus for new learning, so we need to make sure that the cortical memory traces get nice and strong so we can retrieve them without the assistance of the hippocampus. Now, what about retrieval, the retrieval part? Well, on the brain on the left, early on, as we saw, in order to retrieve information that we just learned, we're going to need the assistance of the hippocampus because these are weak cortical memory traces, and our frontal cortex retrieval systems may have trouble retrieving that information. But on the next day, as we continue to practice retrieving the same information, what seems to be happening is that we're building stronger retrieval pathways. So these are physical connections between brain areas, and synapses can strengthen in these neural pathways as well. So every time we practice retrieving the same information, we are strengthening the retrieval pathways, as shown by the darker red arrows compared to the dashed arrows. And on the next day, if we attempt to retrieve that same information again, we are strengthening those retrieval pathways. So with repeated retrieval, neural pathways are better able to locate and activate a memory trace. So notice it's one thing to have strong cortical memory traces, but the brain also has to be able to locate those memory traces when we need to locate them. And that's what these retrieval pathways do. So if we're going to be successful at retrieving information from our brain, we want to have strong cortical memory traces, but we also want to have effective retrieval pathways. Our brain has to have an effective way of locating just the information that we want to find in our long-term memory system. Now, this is important then. What it means is successful retrieval requires two components. We've got to have strong cortical memory traces, right, built up by repeated study and consolidation during sleep. But we also want to have strong retrieval pathways built up by using retrieval practice. Now, these two components of successful retrieval also shed light on the phenomenon of forgetting. We will see there are two ways to forget that sort of map onto these two elements of successful retrieval.